When 73-year-old Dorothy Mae Henderson walked onto that gleaming stage, her orthopedic shoes squeaking against the polished floor, and her floral dress from JCPenney clearly marking her as someone who didn't belong in this world of sequins and spotlights, the celebrity judges exchanged knowing glances. One audience member actually whispered loud enough for the microphones to catch, "What's Grandma doing here?" But Dorothy Mae was about to deliver the kind of moment that transforms cynics into believers and reminds us all that the most extraordinary gifts often come wrapped in the most ordinary packages. Growing up in small-town Millbrook, Tennessee, Dorothy Mae was the middle child of 7 kids in a family where survival took precedence over dreams. Her father, Earl Henderson, worked 16-hour days at the lumber mill, and her mother, Betty, took in washing and mending to make ends meet. Music was something you heard on the radio while you worked, not something you dared to dream about pursuing. But even as a little girl, Dorothy Mae would find herself humming melodies while she helped her mother hang laundry, creating harmonies that seemed to float on the Tennessee breeze like magic. At 17, Dorothy Mae fell head over heels for a charming mechanic named James Franklin Miller. He had callous hands that could fix anything with an engine, and a smile that made her stomach flutter like butterflies trapped in a mason jar. They married 3 months after her high school graduation, and Dorothy Mae traded her maiden name for the promise of a life filled with love and laughter. James used to joke that her voice was prettier than any singer on the Grand Ole Opry, but Dorothy Mae would just blush and tend to hush his sweet talking. The early years were magical. James worked at Patterson's auto shop on Main Street, and Dorothy Mae took a job at the local 5 and dime store. They rented a tiny apartment above Murphy's Bakery, where the smell of fresh bread would wake them every morning. On Sunday evenings, James would tune the radio, and they'd dance in their tiny living room while Dorothy Mae sang along to Patsy Cline and Loretta Lynn. Those were the moments when her voice truly soared, filling their small space with something that felt bigger than both of them combined. Then came the children. First little Sarah, then twins Bobby and Billy 2 years later, followed by sweet Emma. Suddenly, Dorothy Mae's world became a whirlwind of diapers, bottles, school lunches, and scraped knees. Her singing became limited to lullabies in darkened nurseries, and humming while she folded endless loads of laundry. The bills kept mounting. James worked longer hours, and Dorothy Mae took on extra shifts at the 5 and dime. Dreams, she told herself, were luxuries she couldn't afford. But here's what Dorothy Mae didn't know. Every cashier at a grocery store, every neighbor hanging laundry, every person within earshot stopped what they were doing when she hummed. There was something in her voice that made people pause, something that touched a place deep in their souls they didn't even know existed. Yet Dorothy Mae remained completely oblivious to this gift, too busy surviving to notice the magic she carried within her. Years blended into decades. The children grew up and moved away to chase their own dreams in bigger cities. Sarah became a nurse in Nashville. The twins started their own construction business in Memphis, and Emma moved to Atlanta to work for a marketing firm. The house that once overflowed with laughter and chaos became eerily quiet. James retired from the auto shop, and they settled into the rhythm of quiet retirement, watching game shows and tending to their small vegetable garden. Then came the diagnosis that would change everything. James started forgetting small things at first. Where he'd put his reading glasses, what day of the week it was, the names of neighbors they'd known for decades. The doctors used words like early onset and progressive, but all Dorothy Mae heard was that the man she'd loved for over 50 years was slowly slipping away from her. As James's condition worsened, Dorothy Mae became his full-time caregiver. She helped him dress, reminded him to eat, and held his hand through confusion and fear. But the hardest part wasn't the physical care. It was watching the man who once told her she sang like an angel forget her name entirely. During his final months, the only thing that seemed to bring James peace was when Dorothy Mae would sing to him. His eyes would clear momentarily, and sometimes he'd even hum along to songs from their early years together. James passed away on a Tuesday morning in March, holding Dorothy Mae's hand while she sang Amazing Grace. The funeral was small, just their children, a handful of neighbors, and the pastor from First Baptist. After everyone left and the casseroles had been eaten and the flowers had wilted, Dorothy Mae found herself completely alone for the first time in 56 years. The grief was suffocating. Days blended into weeks of silence. So complete it felt like the world had forgotten she existed. Her children called regularly, worried about their mother living alone in that big house filled with memories. They suggested she move to assisted living, maybe find some activities to keep herself busy. But Dorothy Mae couldn't imagine starting over at 73. What did she have to offer anyone? The answer came from the most unexpected source. Her 8-year-old great-granddaughter, Lily, came to visit one weekend. While Dorothy Mae was washing dishes, Lily asked her to sing the same lullaby she'd sung to all her babies. As Dorothy Mae's voice filled the kitchen with a gentle melody, Lily stopped playing with her toys and stared at her great-grandmother with wide eyes. "Grammy Dorothy, why don't you sing on TV like the people on American Idol?" Dorothy Mae laughed, but Lily was serious. "My teacher says people with special talents should share them with the world. You have the most beautiful voice I've ever heard." That night, after Lily had gone home, Dorothy Mae sat in her empty living room thinking about her great-granddaughter's words. She walked over to James's old recliner and picked up the remote, flipping channels until she landed on America's Got Talent. As she watched contestant after contestant take the stage, sharing their dreams and talents with millions of viewers, something stirred deep in her chest. What if she had something to offer after all? What if the voice that had comforted her children through nightmares, that had been James's final source of peace? What if that voice could touch other people too? The idea was terrifying. At 73, Dorothy Mae had never been on an airplane, never stayed in a hotel, never been further from home than the State Fair in Nashville. The thought of standing on a stage in front of celebrity judges and a studio audience made her hands shake. But something else was growing stronger than the fear, a tiny seed of possibility that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to discover who she could become. Her daughter, Sarah, tried to talk her out of it. "Mama, those shows are for young people with professional training. You don't want to embarrass yourself on national television." But Dorothy Mae had made up her mind. She filled out the online application, recorded a simple video of herself singing in her living room, and mailed it off before she could change her mind. Months passed without a response, and Dorothy Mae began to think it had been a foolish idea. Then, on a Thursday morning in September, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was young and energetic, explaining that the producers had seen her audition video and wanted her to come to Los Angeles for the live auditions. The flight to California was Dorothy Mae's first time off the ground. She clutched her purse in her lap and stared out the window at clouds that looked close enough to touch, wondering if she'd lost her mind. The hotel was fancier than anywhere she'd ever stayed, with marble floors and gold fixtures that made her feel like she was visiting a palace. The day of her audition, Dorothy Mae woke up at 4 a.m, too nervous to sleep. She put on her best dress, a floral print she'd worn at church for the past 3 years, and her most comfortable shoes. Looking in the mirror, she saw exactly what everyone else would see: a 73-year-old woman who looked like somebody's grandmother, not someone who belonged on a stage competing for $1 million. The backstage area was chaos. Young singers warming up with vocal exercises that sounded like foreign languages, dancers stretching in impossible positions, magicians practicing tricks that defied logic. Dorothy Mae found a quiet corner and closed her eyes, thinking about James and the way his face would light up when she sang to him. She thought about little Lily's words about sharing special talents with the world. Most of all, she thought about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she had been given this voice for a reason. When her name was called, Dorothy Mae's legs felt like jelly. The walk from the wings to center stage felt like a mile, her orthopedic shoes squeaking against the polished floor with each step. The audience was massive. Hundreds of faces staring back at her, many with expressions of barely concealed amusement. She could hear whispers and see people nudging each other, clearly wondering what this elderly woman was doing on their stage. The judges looked skeptical too. Simon Cowell raised an eyebrow. Sophia Vergara smiled politely, and Heidi Klum tilted her head with curiosity. Terry Crews, the host, approached with his usual enthusiasm. But even he seemed surprised by Dorothy Mae's presence. When he asked her to introduce herself, Dorothy Mae's voice came out smaller than she'd hoped. She explained that she was 73, from Tennessee, and that she'd never performed for anyone outside her family. The audience's murmurs grew louder. Someone in the back actually laughed out loud. Simon Cowell looked at his watch, as if he was already ready for the next contestant. But then Dorothy Mae did something that changed everything. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. The song was Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, but the way it emerged from Dorothy Mae's throat was unlike anything anyone in that auditorium had ever heard. Her voice started soft, almost fragile, like morning mist over a Tennessee valley. But as the first verse progressed, something magical began to happen. The laughter died instantly. The whispers ceased. Even the judges sat up straighter in their chairs. Dorothy Mae's voice began to soar, carry with it every heartbreak she'd ever endured, every moment of joy she'd experienced, every lullaby she'd sung in darkened nurseries, and every prayer she'd whispered over her husband's bedside. It was a voice that had been seasoned by 7 decades of life, polished by pain and refined by love. As she reached the chorus, her voice filled every corner of that massive auditorium with such raw emotion that grown men began to wipe their eyes. The camera operators forgot to follow their choreographed movements, transfixed by what they were witnessing. Sofia Vergara's hand flew to her chest, and Heidi Klum's mouth fell open in shock. But it was Simon Cowell's reaction that said it all. The man known for his cutting remarks and impossible standards slowly stood up from his judge's chair, his face a mixture of amazement and respect. As Dorothy Mae hit the song's climactic high note, her voice breaking slightly with emotion but never losing its power, Simon began to applaud. Then Sophia joined him. Then Heidi. Then the entire audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause. When Dorothy Mae finished the song and opened her eyes, she was met with something she'd never experienced in her 73 years, a standing ovation from strangers who had been moved to tears by her gift. The judges were speechless for several long moments before Simon finally found his voice. Dorothy Mae, he said, his usual British sarcasm replaced by genuine emotion. In 30 years of judging talent competitions, I have never heard anything quite like that. You didn't just sing that song. You lived it. You breathed life into it. You made every person in this room feel something profound. The other judges echoed his sentiment, using words like extraordinary, breathtaking, and magical. But what meant the most to Dorothy Mae was when Sophia looked directly into her eyes and said, "You have given all of us a gift tonight. Thank you for having the courage to share it with the world." All 4 judges voted yes, sending Dorothy Mae through to the next round. As she walked off stage, still in shock for what had just happened, she could hear the audience continuing to applaud. Backstage, other contestants approached her with respect and admiration, calling her an inspiration and asking for advice about performing. Dorothy Mae's journey on America's Got Talent continued for several more rounds. While she didn't win the competition, she accomplished something far more valuable. She discovered that it's never too late to uncover the gifts you've been carrying inside you all along. Her audition video went viral, receiving millions of views and thousands of comments from people around the world who were inspired by her courage. Record labels reached out. She was invited to perform at venues across the country. But most importantly, Dorothy Mae learned that age is just a number when it comes to chasing dreams and sharing your authentic self with the world. She had spent 73 years believing she was ordinary, only to discover that her voice could move mountains. The real magic of Dorothy Mae's story isn't just about her incredible voice. It's about the reminder that we all carry gifts within us that the world needs to experience. Sometimes those gifts remain hidden for decades, waiting for the right moment, the right inspiration, or simply the right amount of courage to set them free. Dorothy Mae Henderson proved that it doesn't matter if you're 17 or 73. If you have something genuine to offer the world is ready to receive it. Her voice had always been extraordinary. She just needed to believe in it enough to let it shine. And when she finally did, she didn't just change her own life. She touched the lives of millions of people who watched her prove that dreams don't have expiration dates, and that the most beautiful music often comes from the most unexpected places.